You know that feeling when it seems like the future is suddenly arriving way, way faster than you expected? Yeah, me too. I mean, to really get a handle on the AI boom that we are all living through right now, we've got to look back at how we got here. So let's do it. Let's dive into the history and try to pinpoint when this whole explosion really kicked off. I mean, for decades, right? Science fiction, everything from the Jetsons to the Terminator, it gave us these visions of the future that always felt, I don't know, kind of far away. But somewhere along the line, the script just completely flipped. All of a sudden, we've gone from punch cards to AI that can generate video, from phone operators to AI avatars that are literally conducting interviews. It's wild. Reality is now lapping our old predictions.
Think about it like this. The timeline has just been squeezed so dramatically that what used to take, say, 2 or 3 years of progress, that's now happening in just a couple of months. It is an absolutely dizzying speed, and it totally changes how we even think about progress.
So yeah, that brings us to the big question, right? The whole reason we're doing this. What was the tipping point? When exactly did that slow, steady march of progress just, boom, kick into high gear, into this exponential growth that's left all of us scrambling to keep up? And here's the thing. The truth is, our brains are just not wired to get this kind of change. It's almost impossible. We think in straight, predictable lines, you know? But technology, and especially AI, it grows on a curve, an exponential one. And to really see that curve, well, we have to go all the way back to the start. Okay, so our story kicks off in what's called the rule-based era. And you should think of the earliest AI not so much as a brain that could learn, but more like a super literal-minded robot. It could only follow these incredibly specific instructions. Basically just a giant list of, if this happens, then do that commands. So the 50s and 60s, this is where all the groundwork was laid. It really kicked off in 1950 when the legendary Alan Turing posed his now famous question: can a machine talk in a way that you can't tell it apart from a human? Fast forward to 56, and boom, the field officially gets its name: artificial intelligence. A year later, we get something called the perceptron. Think of it as like a proto-neural network. And then by 1966, the world meets its very first chatbot. Okay, so this perceptron thing, the core idea was actually pretty simple, but totally revolutionary for its time. It works by weighing different pieces of information. So let's say you're trying to teach it to recognize a cat. You'd tell the system that inputs like has whiskers and has pointy ears are way more important. They get a heavier weight than, say, is brown. It's a really basic concept, but it was the absolute seed for everything that came next. And that brings us to Eliza, the world's first AI chatbot. It was cooked up at MIT, and it was designed to act like a therapist. It was actually a really clever, simple trick. If you said something like, "I'm feeling okay," Eliza would just flip your statement into a question. "Why are you feeling okay?" It was this neat little hack to simulate a real conversation, and it actually made people feel like they were being heard. But then, the brakes got slammed on, hard. A really critical report came out that just kind of soured everyone on the whole perceptron idea. The funding completely dried up, and let's be honest, the computers back then just didn't have the muscle. The AI world entered what we now call its very first AI winter. But, you know, winters don't last forever. By the mid-80s, things started to thaw out. AI saw this big resurgence, and it kicked off the machine learning era. Now, this was a huge shift. Instead of just feeding the AI a bunch of rules, the goal was now to design it so it could find patterns all by itself. And the absolute game changer here was an algorithm called backpropagation. The best way to think about it is like a student taking a practice test. The algorithm lets the AI finish the test, look at its answers, see which ones it totally bombed, and then, this is the key part, it goes back and restudies just the stuff it got wrong. It was this incredibly powerful way for an AI to actually learn from its own mistakes. And with this new tool, the era saw some massive leaps. By '89, we had a network called Linnet that could recognize handwritten numbers, a huge deal at the time. Then in '97, IBM's Deep Blue put AI back on the map in a big way by defeating the world chess champion Garry Kasparov. And then, in 1999, something happened pretty quietly that would end up changing everything. NVIDIA released the first modern GPU. Now, it was designed for video games, but spoiler alert, its destiny was something much, much bigger. But here we go again. History has a funny way of repeating itself, doesn't it? Companies went belly up, the funding evaporated, again, and a general sense of skepticism crept back in. We were officially in the second AI winter. That whole cycle of hype and then disappointment, it was still in full swing. So what was it? What finally broke the cycle for good? Well, it turned out to be a perfect 1-2 punch. First, in 2006, something called deep belief networks came along, and they let AI learn from all the messy, unlabeled junk on the real internet. This removed a massive human bottleneck. Then, just 1 year later, in 2007, NVIDIA's software, CUDA, unlocked the insane parallel processing power of those gaming GPUs for anything, not just graphics. All of a sudden, you had AI that could teach itself, and you had the super-powered hardware to run it on. That was the spark. That was the tipping point. And that combination, those two breakthroughs together, they launched us directly into the era we are living in right this second, the deep learning explosion. And this, my friends, is where the curve goes vertical. So, what's the big deal with the word deep? What makes deep learning so special? Well, a standard neural network has maybe one hidden layer where the real thinking happens between the input and the output. But a deep neural network, it has tons of them, many, many hidden layers. It's like the information gets passed through all these different stages of thinking, which makes it way more complex and capable of some seriously sophisticated analysis. Okay, so now you've got these deep networks running on super fast GPUs, and the floodgates just burst open. Check out this timeline. 2017, the attention is all you need paper, gives us the transformer architecture. That's the T in GPT. Just 3 years later, GPT-3 is writing text that blows everyone's minds. Late 2022, ChatGPT is released to the public and, well, you know what happened next. And then just over a year after that, Sora is generating hyperrealistic video from a text prompt. The pace is it's breathtaking. Which, of course, brings us right back to today. We are all living on the really steep part of that exponential curve now. And honestly, it can feel pretty disorienting, mainly because our very definition of what AI even means is shifting under our feet, like constantly. There's actually a name for this. It's called moving the goalposts. And you've totally experienced it. Think about it. Not that long ago, things like Siri or Alexa, they were considered cutting-edge, mind-blowing AI. Today, most of us don't even think of them as AI anymore. They're just a feature on our phone or a speaker in our kitchen. Our definition of real AI is always whatever's just over the horizon. And you know who summed this up perfectly? The guy who literally coined the term artificial intelligence, John McCarthy. He famously said, "As soon as it works, no one calls it AI anymore." And that's the wild part, right? We have reached a point today that would have seemed like actual magic just 10 years ago, and we've gotten so used to it that we barely even notice. So the big question is, are we heading for another AI winter? It's starting to look pretty unlikely this time around, and there are 3 big reasons why. First, this stuff is everywhere. Every big company and millions of regular people are using it. Second, the money pouring in is just massive and it's not stopping. And third, and this is probably the most important part, AI is now being used to make better AI. The human bottleneck is starting to disappear, which could just keep this exponential growth going. And look, if you need just one single fact to really wrap your head around the scale of this new era, here it is. Right now, as we speak, ChatGPT is one of the top 10 most visited websites on the entire internet. Just let that sink in. It's up there with Google, YouTube, Facebook. This is not some niche little research project anymore. In what feels like the blink of an eye, it's become a global utility. So that leaves us with one last kind of profound question. We're not really asking if this exponential trend is going to continue anymore. The real question is, when progress that used to take years now happens in a matter of months, how do you adapt? When the future arrives faster than any of us can predict, what does being ready even look like?